Okay, so let me start the meeting.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
luck.
Everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the future of vegetation management. This event is brought to you by the EU and Shift to Rail funded project In2Track3. My name is Tiborn, communication consultant at Spinverse, supporting the coordinators Trafikverket, the Swedish Transport Administration. By my side, I have my colleague at Spinverse, Emma Troedsson, who will share the PowerPoint presentation today. You as audience will not be able to use camera or microphone in the webinar. However, the chat works, and so does the reaction button. So please go ahead and ask questions. We will not be able to answer these questions during the talks, but we will try to fit them in the panel talks by the end. Joining me today is Pernilla Edlund, project manager at the Swedish Transport Administration. Pernilla, would you like to share a few words?
Yes, thank you, Mats. I would also like to welcome you all to this vegetation management webinar. And I hope you will have a nice hour ahead of you and that you will learn a lot and that we get to connect the businesses as intended.
Yes, and I think that you could move ahead with the presentations. Yeah, these are the participants today, as you have seen in the registration, and we can actually skip to Pernilla's presentation right ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, this is what it looks like in a lot of our railway network, right? What is hidden here is the nice, clean railway to the right, and the one to the left is really something in need of help. So this is kind of an illustration to the problem that we have at hand, all of us. So we can move to the next slide, please. I am Pernilla Edlund, as Mats said, and I am the coordinator of In2Track3, which is, as he mentioned, a part of the Shift to Rail program. We focus mainly on cost-efficient and reliable high-capacity infrastructure, which means that there's a lot of hardcore work like rail, contact fatigue, lots of other things, condition-based monitoring and other. And we are the fourth project and the last in a line of 4. So if you skip to the next slide. It started, well, more or less, you have to have like a starting point, and this will be ours, I guess. It's Interrail in 2015, and we increased the TRL levels, the technology readiness levels. And I try to illustrate that below in the pictures. We start with drawings, and then we make the prototypes, and eventually, on the last picture in this slide, we have it out in track. This is just one of our demonstrators, but we have several like this that we started, well, closing up to 10 years ago now, and which we're actually now testing out in track, which is very exciting. And In2Track3 will finish in December. So this is the shivering end of it. We can take the next. Just a brief overview. I won't go into details on this, but we work hardcore out in the track, and it's also digitally with the photogrammetric measurements and other. This is just to give you a brief overview. We have like 50 demonstrators of this kind on different readiness levels. And we have a common challenge. Why are we here now for the vegetation management of all things that we could bring up? Well, it's of great interest to infrastructure managers, and it's easy to see why. Because it's an operational hazard, it really constitutes a danger to operating the railway and to the stability, the signals, and it's a fire hazard, as we see now with the drought that we have in front of us. And it's a high cost related to the lack of vegetation management. So this is why we bring this up especially and give some extra focus on this. And our speakers today will share with you their different views on how to do this. So I hope you will enjoy the presentations today, and very welcome. And please contact me if you have any questions on In2Track3 project as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Pernilla. To kick things off, I'd like to invite Ethem Pekin from the Community of European Railway and Infrastructure Companies, CER, to give us an overview of the EU regulations on biodiversity and sustainable use of plant protection products. Welcome, Ethem.
Yes, thank you very much. So it's just an introduction. CR, for the ones that do not know, is the association active in Brussels, working on the EU policy topics on all related areas impacting the railway business, protecting the interest of the infra managers, also the railway companies. With my role there at CR, of course, is addressing sustainability. My 5 slides today will give you a little bit the insight of the ongoing policy initiatives, with little bit guidance to the discussion that we will have with the experts. So if I can have the next slide already on the screen, is that I will be speaking a bit on that EU has a biodiversity issue. So it's a global problem. That's why it's been addressed in terms of a strategy. So that's a little bit like the umbrella framework where there is a plan to restore the nature. And there it's, of course, already some days that it has been adopted. It was almost 3 years ago, where there are various initiatives. Of course, Commission itself is looking into the assessment of this strategy. And there we have some date next year to look into the progress. So that is a little bit the perspective we should keep in our discussions, that in very short-term logic, this strategy might be tweaked. It can be under scrutiny, and there could be more to be done. Where we are looking from this strategy is, of course, certain legislation that is applicable to what we are discussing today. And there we have these 2 proposals, one on a nature restoration law. This is a proposal which is going quite difficulty in the European Parliament as of now. We have also the very specific to the discussions we have, sustainable use of pesticides. So there are the proposal of a regulation. So they are currently in the discussions, not final, and it's important that we take note. Biodiversity itself is also becoming more of a priority topic, and that's why the strategy itself has been guiding action to that. And there we have to name the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is already in place. It's an agreed piece of legislation, and there are some standards on reporting to be done. It will cover many companies. Infra managers that sit today will be, of course, one of that example. There, reporting needs to happen. And we have the green finance agenda of the Commission, where there's a classification of economic activities, and biodiversity is finding its place there. So that's a bit the framework. Thank you for that next slide, where I will go, of course, more into the plant protection products. This is the regulation, where it can be referenced in various policy initiatives. We have on the main side EU Green Deal, which is with the current Commission, the big strategy to reach the net zero emissions, but also be green eventually. We have there a dedicated action plan on the zero pollution, reduction of the pollution towards the soil and water is finding its place, in addition to, of course, air pollution. We have, of course, a relevance to the farm to fork with the agriculture reforms, and also the, as we said, the biodiversity strategy itself. So this is the policy relevance, and there we have, in terms of the European Commission, targets towards the 2030, where there should be the reduction of the overall use of and risk from the chemical plant protection products, and also the more reduction on the use of more hazardous ones. So that's really the goals. Where we have is that this kind of EU level targets need to be also tackled at the national level. So the nature is that there will be obligatory targets, And of course, there's a particular look at sensitive areas where bans and restrictions are debated. What we can speak is also about obligation for the companies, for the countries to look at these reductions and in case bans, that there should be proper and strong monitoring and reporting. Overall, we had this is not a new legislation. It was a directive already from 2009, very much implemented. And now we are discussing a change towards a more directly applicable regulation. If we continue with the slides, with the next slide, I'm going a little bit more in deep that the legal framework for this plant protection products and their, in particular, authorization and use, as in the railway case, is that we have a dedicated regulation, again from 2009, where it focuses on the placing on the market of these products through this dual approach, where we speak about an active substance that is approved at the EU level as of now. As of course, we have glyphosate, one of those substances that has been politically debated a lot, and there's a attempt to switch from that. So that is actually ongoing initiative from the European Commission with the technical agencies from the chemical side and food safety. Are going through this process to approve whether to approve the active substance by end of this year. We have, of course, once there's an active substance approved, a commercial product to be authorized at the national level for the specific use. We have, as I said, this directive, which is now to be reformed through a regulation on plant protection products, addressing the risks, but also this addresses human health and the impact on environment. And with the current proposal that came last year, is that Article 18 of this Commission proposal look at the sensitive area and certain distances from it to ban completely plant protection products, where there could be possibility. Derogations are very limited, so case by case, and there's a certain date restriction. We also have from this proposal messages on the surface water impact, and there could be the bans. So these, I think we should keep in the discussion that are currently debated in the EU institutions. And of course, there's an immediate impact on railway vegetation management. The next slide will be just to maybe resume where we are as of now. That, as I said, European Parliament has been discussing this file in addition to the European Council with member states. There we have the Environment Committee of the Parliament responsible for this. And in addition, the Agriculture Committee itself is developing opinions. So there are amendments. Also, some of them are pointing out to the railway issues related to vegetation management, our motivation to switch from chemical to more cleaner alternatives in particular, but in between why this piece of legislation will impact the rail, and how we need to maintain the tracks clean of vegetation. We have, as of now, in September, after the summer break, a vote in the Environment Committee, and there the European Parliament could be adopting their final opinion, final position by the beginning of October. On the side of European Council, there has been the different discussions at the Agriculture and Fishery Council, and then there's also the specific working party which deals with these products. And there has been kind of short delays in that kind of procedure, where the Commission was requested by the member states to perform additional impact assessment data and to have a more informed discussion, especially on the impact of any ban or restrictions when it comes to the food prices. When we have the Ukraine war in place, that was a bit the reason. And of course, this discussions also handles the ban on sensitive area, definition of sensitive areas. So we have already from last December a non-paper where there are some options for member states to discuss. but also quite soon, beginning of next month, we should have additional communication from the Commission. Then we will see how the discussions goes. My final slide is basically to bring there, if I have it on the screen, is that to have a discussion with you that we have, of course, an objective to have a sustainable and nature-based alternative to vegetation control. And there, the sensitive areas in particular, as currently defined in the proposals, could really make it difficult to manage vegetation. And of course, the regulations there need to be defined, or excluding rail from the scope of such regulation. This is not an issue only for railways, but transport infrastructure in general. So it's good that such things are quite noted by the policymakers, but we have to see how this goes. But also with our internal work and discussions, environmental risk management of the chemical use is also quite important, where we look at the active substance characteristics, how it's been used. There's then, of course, occupational safety, and of course, the impact on citizen health and environment in general. So overall concern need to be properly addressed. I will end my presentation now and look forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethem. Next, we have Michael Belov from Deutsche Bahn, who will provide an overview of the Tristram project and share insights on the management of vegetation across various European infrastructure managers. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mats, and warm welcome also from my side. I would like to give you a small insight view on the UIC project Tristram, which we carried out between 2019 and 2020. Next slide. So before I start, I would like to show you some numbers, and I want to go into very detail in these tables, don't worry. So I just want to focus on the 91% of the network within the European railways, which is treated with herbicides according to the national legislation, which might be slightly different to what you have heard from Ethem before. And I just want to show you that only 1% of the network is treated by constructive measures, as you see in the left-hand table, and 4% of the network is treated with mechanical methods. So far, that was a status in 2017 and 2018. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the Tristram project, which follows the Herbie project directly, was to set up a toolbox to avoid the use of chemicals in vegetation control due to the main goal we have, which is demanded by different stakeholder groups. We should avoid the use of chemicals wherever this is possible to minimize the environmental impacts and risk to human health. That is in line with what you have already heard from Ethem due to the legislation. So there are different tools in this box. One is the alternative methods. I will go into detail on my next slides. We have the optimization of the herbicide use. We are looking at standards. We look at contracting concepts. We look at application technologies and other digital tools. And as you may see, there are some linkage between these different tools, which you will see on the next slides. Next slide, please. So starting with the alternative methods, we identified hot water and electro reading besides some constructive measures, which are, I have to say, not yet ready for the operational use in the whole network. This is due to the operational speed, due to efficiency. So there are still some questions, so some developments which are needed to get those methods into operational use for a large scale application. On the other hand, therefore, there is need to use herbicides still in the short to medium term. And we see there are some other issues to reduce, to optimize the quantities which are required, as you all have already have heard from Ethem as well, like the EU legislation which want to reduce the use of pesticides by 50% up to the year 2030. This can be done by plant detection systems which are mounted on spraying trains or in two-way vehicles, which you see on the two figures on the right-hand side. But beside this, there is also need to develop sustainable herbicides which can be used in the track area. Next slide, please. Coming to the standards and the contracting, we already know, or so far there is a paradigm within the railway companies that there is no vegetation allowed in the track itself. And we think, or we discover due to practical observations, that this paradigm has to be evaluated or re-evaluated, and maybe it has to be replaced by a new standardized project in the near future. Therefore, it's need to have some more investigations about the impacts of vegetation on the immediate track area, which is not very easy, you can imagine. New contracts or contractings are also needed for our meaning, because to promote alternative methods for vegetation control, you have to demand them on the market. And so far, the focus is, as you have seen on my first figure, it's focused on herbicides. And therefore, we propose new tender concepts, like, for example, including also railway lines or sections within the network which are treated with non-chemical methods like water protection areas, nature conservation areas, and so on, because actually the contracts are like this, that all areas where there is a ban or restrictions on herbicides are excluded from those contracts, and there is no real alternative in use for those track areas. Therefore, we suggest a new new tendering for the whole network, for example. So you tender the whole network, defining certain track qualities, and it's up to the service provider how he is fulfilling those demands. So he has to choose between chemicals and non-chemical methods, but provide a certain track quality. Next slide, please. And the technical side, it's not only the technical side on the train, it's also the technical side within the planning process, for example. Therefore, technical tools, mainly geographic information systems, mainly known as GIS systems, which are becoming more and more important for the planning process and as well for documentation, for monitoring, as you have heard from Ethem in his talk, because these databases can be used for the GPS system, which is placed on the spraying trains or on the two-way vehicles to get a more optimized vegetation control. Beside this, application technologies has to develop further on. And we were thinking about hybrid solutions, meaning that you have only one carrier on which different kind of methods are operated, like, for example, chemicals in combination with hot water, or chemicals in combination with electroreading, or what else it might be possible. This, in general, allows a flexible and efficient coverage of the whole network, because then you can drive with one carrier through the whole network, and the treatment is belonging or is related to the demands coming from the regulations. For example, starting with a hot water application in a nature conservation area, afterwards switching to a chemical application, and further on, for example, for electroreading or something else. So there is more flexibility in this, and if this could be improved in a more automatic way, this allows a higher flexibility to use the different kind of methods, which is not available nowadays. Besides this, robotic platforms for mowing, for example, offer also a high degree of automatization, and which is in development for the walking path besides a gravel bed, for example. And I'm in very good hope that this will be in use very soon. Next slide, please. So concluding, I would say follow us on this future way, that because I think the railways are really actively developing a holistic approach, just from a single method-based concept to an integrated approach, meaning using flexible multi-method-based methods, as I have shown you in the figure before. And this new approach is able or allows us to treat the different kind of track areas we will find within our network with a very specified method. I would like to say thank you for this, for your attention. Next slide, this is my last one. And if you have more questions, you can look on these internet links, and I hope we will have some time, spare time for questions at the end. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Michael. Moving on, we will now hear from Baptiste BONZON of SNCF. He will share results from the In2Track3 project on vegetation management and provide an overview of how SNCF manages weed. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Matt. So I will begin for the first part to talk to you about how SNCF Réseau have managed to stop the use of glyphosate, because as you know, maybe SNCF Réseau is the first network who committed to stop the use of glyphosate. So on the next slide and the one after, you will have the four main actions we have done to be ready for the end of glyphosate use in 2021. The two main actions are the replacement of our weeding train. So we have purchased a new weeding train or adapt train we already had to had vegetation detection, also to adapt the circuit of spraying to be able to use the biocontrol project. And also we have also managed to have our GIS system in the train to have the capacity to have the traceability of the treatment. And the second main part is the new project. We have found that the combination of pelargonic acid and antigerminative based on sulfonylurea allow the mix to have efficacy of 60 days, whereas pelargonic acid alone has only 20 days of efficacy. Basically, pelargonic acid is the only biocontrol acid we can use because acetic acid is corrosive for the rail, and also the other acid is the caprylic acid, but the dosage of caprylic acid is 80 liters per hectare, and our weeding train can only spray product at 25 liters per hectare. About the project, on the next slide, we can have an example of the efficacy of the mix after 45 days. You can see a big difference between the treated area and the untreated area. So even if the mix of product is not as efficient as glyphosate, we can see a kind of systemic effect with the mix between pelargonic acid and sulfonylurea, because at the end, when the pelargonic acid allows the sulfonylurea to go into the vegetation, The sulfonylurea has both an anti-germinative effect, but also an herbicide effect. And that's why we have a kind of a systemic effect thanks to the mix. So then we move on the scope of the searches we have done thanks to In2Track3 program about the feasibility study of electromagnetical weeding for track and safety paths. So we have worked with two laboratories in France, INRAE and also the Clermont-Ferrand University, to study different ways of exposition using electromagnetical waves. So the first one was non-thermic spread electromagnetic wave. So as you can see on the top right, we have exposed vegetation to a kind of electromagnetic wave. And we have studied morphological change and biochemistry change in the vegetation exposed. At a morphological scale, we have not seen any difference after 7 days of exposition. So the first idea could be that there is no effect on the vegetation. But when we look at the biochemistry level, we can see that there is a movement in some concentration of H2O2, for example, which is a signal about a process of oxidative stress. So we don't see morphological effect, but we have low magnitude changes inside the plant, which allows us to say that there is a little stress in the plant, but not enough to kill it. The second exposition on the next slide was the thermic spread exposition. So this is the same kind of application on the top right, but this time we can observe that the plant is heated. So it's like the microwave you have in your kitchen. So we can see for considered parameter on the screen the kill of the vegetation after 1 minute. This time we also have a morphological impact on the vegetation, and we kill the vegetation. So thanks to the laboratory, they have done a computer simulation about the core parameters involved in the thermic spread exposition, power, time exposition, distance of exposition, and also the antenna gain to have a kind of graphic to determine for a considered distance, for example, if we can kill the plant with a certain power. For example, if you want to kill the vegetation on the safety paths, which are almost at 2 meters from the train, we know that we will need a lot of power or a lot of exposition duration. So we can say that it could be difficult to see the use of that kind of electromagnetic wave, because for example, our weeding train are running at 60 kilometers per hour. So we cannot consider that we can kill vegetation at 60 kilometers per hour with electromagnetic waves. For this exposition, we have also done a prototype to use it in our train station. So the big issue is that to have to observe an effect on the vegetation which goes to 1 month, almost 1 month. we need to run at 0.034 km per hour. So even if, of course, we can see that on the right picture, the treated area is very thin. I think we would need a very low speed to have a great efficacy of the method used with that prototype. So that's why we can conclude that this kind of method is very difficult to use on track, and even in other areas like, for example, train station or maintenance building, around the maintenance building, it will be not competitive with manual mowing. And the last hypothesis was the combination of both. We can see that actually the thermic exposition is the main effect when we combine both exposition, because whatever the non-thermic exposition we are using, the time is always the same to kill the vegetation, to get the kill of the vegetation. So a double exposition doesn't bring any benefit on the vegetation death. It's really only the thermic exposition which is predominant in that type of combination. And I think, yes, I'm done with the presentation of the In2Track3 project. Thank you.
Thank you, Baptiste. Our next speaker is Pinar YILMAZER from the International Union of Railways, UIC. You will discuss strategies for implementing sustainable habitat management in railways with an emphasis on vegetation control and biodiversity. Pinar, welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to address you today as leading the land use activities at UIC. In the context of today's discussion, I'll share some of our activities in the field of land use management that have generated a considerable interest, especially by the European railways, and also some strategic insights that we believe require the further attention, and explain them in terms of the development of railways. So on the next slide. So first of all, I'm going to explain sorry, it's not going. Oh yeah, okay, sorry, it's my screen. So firstly, I will describe why we as an international railway organization pay particular attention to habitat management, and how we address the biodiversity on railways together with our members, and then what we as railway stakeholders define as the path we need to follow, so that we can get on track for sustainable habitat management with scientifically proved activities. On the next slide, with the global transport landscape, with the global transport landscape shifting to meet the demand for mobility and the decarbonization targets, as also highlighted by the UN, also the smart mobility strategies, existing transport infrastructure is predicted to get busier, and the new rail lines are also planned in Europe. So according to the latest, also the data from OECD, we can also expect a great increase on the demand for the passenger transport by 2050. But however, there is still a need to incorporate the habitat management into strategy documents and action plans for achieving the sustainable development goals. The next slide. But we take a great pride in the fact that railways are a frugal mode of transport, including being a frugal in land take. Despite that, railways occupy the lands over a wide network, we have both responsibility and also opportunity to protect the biodiversity on our land. Next slide. Next one, yes. So our actions have a direct impact on biodiversity, ecosystems, and overall health of our planet. Railways are committed to providing the convenient, safe, and efficient mobility, with also the less impact on people and the environment. So therefore, we must, as a railway sectors, we must ask ourselves, can the line side be managed for the biodiversity and climate mitigation, and also to improve the safety, reliability, and resilience? On the next one, proactively managing and investing in the green and blue assets, as just what we do for the gray assets in our daily businesses, brings also the great benefits in terms of the bank stabilization, water management, cooling effects, screening and the landscape visual benefits, and also carbon sequestrations. Railway provides relatively undisturbed corridors, including a mosaic of habitats. Embankments, ditches, and woodlands provide the linear habitat features. Therefore, the previous questions answer yes, railway as a green corridor can be both a hazard and also a lifeline for an ecosystem, and we must ensure to taking care of our land and provide a space for the wildlife to thrive. The next slide. So the sustainability is a movement. That's what we say in UIC. And we are working alongside our members to expand rail networks globally without resulting in biodiversity loss. So together with our members, we carried out international projects, including benchmarking studies, published reports, and guidelines on practical and also technical solutions for railways. Here I'm sharing some the documents and the links. I'm not sure that you can reach on the screen now, but you will going to receive it later. And from now on, I will briefly explain our harmonized approaches on habitat management, including how to integrate the future vegetation control systems. Next, please. So railway infrastructure should be an integral part of the natural landscape and the green network that connect natural habitats as well as people. Therefore, together with our members in UIC, we set 13 recommended strategies and actions on how to avoid, minimize, mitigate, and offset our impacts on environment, on biodiversity, let's say, through the sustainable management on railways. So I want to shed light on our strategies that aim to achieve sustainable habitat management in railways. And then on the next slide. So vegetation control plays a critical role in ensuring the safety and reliability of our tracks. For instance, we have focused on guiding the sector in terms of the vegetation management through the achievements of the Tristram project, as Michael already mentioned that. And in order to make the transition away from the traditional methods and towards the regeneration, it is necessary to determine what needs to be controlled on which land, and then decide to what methods we're going to apply and which frequencies. And on the next slide. So the way we manage our lands, we know that will make a positive differences to the wildlife and promote safe and reliable operations. Therefore, by implementing eco-friendly approaches to the vegetation management, we can actually mitigate the potential negative effects on biodiversity while maintaining the necessary safety standards. So engage in activities like what we are doing today in here on alternative methods are in fact an important steps to contribute to no net loss and net gain targets. We also listed how we can avoid the use of harmful chemicals by introducing the alternative methods to our daily business, and Michael's presentation was a perfect example for that. And also just one more point, our recommendation was not only limited to operation services, we also refer to the preventive methods, which should be taken into consideration during design and construction phases. Next one. We recognize the main driver was always linked to the national and European policies, while policymakers are responsible to encourage the stakeholders for better managing the biodiversity as well as the corporate responsibility. We must take an active role in the development of the national strategies by responding to consultations, reviewing the draft documents. So one example from Germany which is showing the close collaboration with the Deutsche Bahn, with the German Federal Ministry of Environment, where railway activities and the position very well represented in the national document. One of our other analysis also revealed that most important constraint facing the sector in habitat management is also the lack of resources, skills, and knowledge. To tackle this issue, we need to build knowledge about the designated areas or the protected species by providing in-house training. This could be also for our ecologists that are working in our companies, so they can learn for what is the existing regulatory frameworks and the standards, but also we can collaborate with the local schools or the other NGOs, can also help us to prepare for the future for our communication. Next, please. So knowing our biodiversity assets, recognizing irreplaceable habitats, and valuing our lands are key factors for the implementation of the best sustainable habitat management plan. We should continue to monitor and map what we have in existing or new lines, and as we do actually in our day-to-day businesses for our asset management. In this case, digitalization is also influencing the transformation of habitat management through satellite mapping and ecological data collection in green infrastructure, corridors, and habitats. Now we can go to the next one. So avoid, minimize, restore, or offset all the mitigation hierarchy approaches will help to improving the management of the assets in long term and also monitoring the progress towards to our targets. However, there is a lack of consistency what we monitor on the line side habitat. Often our members focus on the different aspects, and we observed that this was mainly due to the different geographical conditions and also the legal factors. Therefore, we support the consideration of biodiversity at the earliest stages of planning. I'm going to repeat this one as much as possible. And before selecting appropriate measures for habitat management, we are recommending also application of mitigation hierarchy to our construction and operation works. And it's almost finishing on the next slide. I know it's not easy to turn the complex systems into easily digestible stories. When we have no performance indicators or metrics, we have no chance to analyze what we have achieved or what we lost. So here we suggest some performance indicators. If you never use any indicators on your network, please take a look at them in the reverse reports. To ensure we have the data availability and similar approaches on railways, we must work together under the same umbrella and set our indicators with our objectives. So the next one, that's my conclusion. So I hope that our strategies on railways will motivate and inspire you to take further steps forward to the research and the management, and be even more ambitious on habitat management and development of the future alternative methods. So here we list some of the key takeaways from my presentation and highlight the areas where we anticipate receiving more activities, more research while developing the plan for the future vegetation management. So I conclude in here, and the next slide probably, and hope that today I will encourage you to think about a bit more what your legacy for sustainable habitat management could be. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pinar. Our final speaker for today is Pascal from CropLife Europe. He will discuss the viewpoint of herbicide manufacturers on the future of vegetation management and share insights on how European railway infrastructure companies can apply these products sustainably. Welcome, Pascal.
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, good morning to all. I'm representing CropLife Europe, which is the plant protection product industry across Europe. Next, please. So the first message we would like to pass is that CropLife Europe does support the so-called IPM strategy, Integrated Pest Management Strategy, which consists in keeping the use of products only to levels which are justified to minimize risk. So therefore, if railways could manage to prevent vegetation from the construction of the railways themselves, from physical, mechanical method, then you use plant protection products, namely herbicide, in the last resort. Could be whatever it's biological herbicide or chemical herbicides. So we do approve and follow this principle. Next. While there are generally speaking a depletion of herbicide and plant protection products due to regulation, our industry still invests billions in the search of next generation herbicides. This research and development is driven by agriculture. Why? Because unfortunately, railways represent less than 1% of the plant protection uses. However, we encourage railways to keep partnering, like you said, Pinar, with industries, including our industry, because if we find, you see here from various companies, Bayer, BASF, New Farm, Corteva, Syngenta, you name them, if we find new active substance, surely this could have a benefit for railways. Next. However, the innovation will not only come from CropLife Europe partners. You see here a representation of the value chain for innovation in vegetation control on railways. Of course, there are members of CropLife Europe. You have here the big companies. There are companies which are as well developers of products, but contractors, InView and Certis, for example. But innovation could come from contractors themselves, which are mainly country-specific. And you have an example of contractors here with their logo across Europe. You have as well technology providers which are not acting in railways per se, but of which their technology could be very useful, and railways yourself. We show an example from Deutsche Bahn and SNCF Réseau, who are also trying to bring innovation. So the innovation will come from one of these fellows, and let's work with through the whole value chain, and you could do it because it's not a private market, it's a public market, and you could do it by incentive, with incentive program in public tenders like Dr. Bello showed, which was a recommendation from the Tristram project, and which is followed even in countries like Italy and Spain, I saw recently. Next. Like Dr. Bello and Baptiste BONZON showed, it's clear, we acknowledge that there is no alternative solution yet, which will be fully sustainable according to RB and Tristram methodology with the scorecards, because we don't look only at efficacy, you also look railways in the socio-economic and the operability of the methods. It's useless to have a method which kill vegetations, but with application speed of 1 or 5 kilometers. We can imagine the consequence in terms of traffic and cost. So we all keep searching the holy grail, but let's recognize that it's not available as today. So that herbicide, like you said, Michael, herbicide could still bridge between now and the time where a magic solution will be identified. Next. Also, what you showed, Michael, there is surely ways to use less herbicides and to use herbicide only where and when it's absolutely necessary. We like very much in CropLife industry this strategic paper from the UIC, the so-called Future of Vegetation Control, which have been edited 3 years ago, with 5 principles: the automatic plant detection to reduce herbicide up to 70% on whatever vehicle, the GIS system to manage restricted areas, water bodies automatically. That means we cut the nozzle a couple of meters before the sensitive area. The online documentation after the treatments, which provide with weed mapping and treatments reports, which are very useful as well to calibrate the campaign the year after. The plant species recognition, this is green on green strategy. We can now recognize invasive and noxious species, for example, which is a breakthrough in technology, even at high speed. And all this could be in incentive program, like I said, through a public tender. And we are very happy to see that a couple of European countries and even beyond Europe, like United Kingdom, implemented this strategy from the UIC. You have France, Belgium, Germany, and the Nordics, which is great. However, there are still progress because we observe that some countries and railways don't ask for these technologies yet. So I'm turning on the south of Europe and the east of Europe. The members they could modernize their vegetation control methodology for the sake of using less herbicides. Next, please, Matt. Like Ethan showed, the regulation is evolving in Europe, and we are quite happy that the so-called sustainable use regulation of plant protection product, which is still ongoing, probably until end of 2024, as a discussion and negotiation between the European Commission, the European Council, and the European Parliament. We were quite happy that the proposal to change the definition of sensitive areas by excluding roads, railways, airports from the definition for the sake of integrity of the network and safety of passengers. So we cross fingers that railways might not be considered in the future as sensitive areas because otherwise it would be difficult to maintain the use of product. Today, in countries like Belgium, for example, railways are considered as public area, and therefore Infrabel needs to ask for derogation every year, which is a lot of bureaucracy. So we hope this regulation will clarify that infrastructure are excluded from the definition of sensitive areas just because vulnerable people and population at risk normally don't go on railways. You know, it's not a place where you want to walk with your children over the weekend. Click for the right part, Matt. Just click. Just one sentence on the controversial situation of glyphosate. You remember that in 2017, it was some allegation that glyphosate active suspense was carcinogenic. Allegation, again, rumors, now facts. You have ECA, which is the European Commission body for chemical safety, judging about studies and scientific argumentation. And ECA concluded in May 2022 that we cannot justify to keep glyphosate as a carcinogen product, which is a step. And the next step will be next month, probably with EFSA, the European Agency for Safety. Ingredient will probably occur with the recommendation of ECA. So we will see, but maybe all the polemics around glyphosate might not be justified anymore, and maybe by the end of the year, glyphosate might be renewed and will be proven to be safe. Facts again, no allegation and no politics around. Next slide. Last message from me as a takeaway messages for European railways. First, very happy that I was invited through the webinar to represent the CropLife industry, because it's important, I believe, that we maintain a dialogue and you guys, you support my industry to capture future innovation like new active substance, for example, and through as well position paper like the CER did to the European Commission last September against this regulation. Second message, like I showed in the map, European map, railways should further deploy smart application system to reduce the use of herbicide up to 70%. We see again member state and railways not being so active. The big railways are Swedish Trafikverket, Deutsche Bahn, Infrabel, SNCF, Network Rail, etc. But some railways are a bit behind. So please continue to work on this path. Third, a message for the UIC. Pinar, you guys, the UIC organized 2 vegetation conference, 2 workshops about vegetation control, one at Coventry 2013, one in Paris 2016. We are now 2023. Maybe this year or next year, it would be great to meet, to organize a meeting across all the industry and invite potentially others from the US and Japan to see where we are today on vegetation control. Always very useful to have this kind of conference. Fourth message, because there is no yet alternative methods, we are happy that we can bridge with our solution until this method will be found. So again, let's optimize and use herbicide in a sustainable manner. Almost last message, it was mentioned from Pinar, the problem of invasive alien species. There are technologies today which recognize automatically these species that could be used. And last and not least, don't proactively ban a product which could be safe, because if you have less and less herbicides, at the end of the day, you are going to lose bullets against the war of unwanted weeds. Thank you very much, and I look forward for the discussion. It's precisely 3 p.m.
Yes, that's true. As you might have noticed, we have used 1 hour, but I think that this is really an important discussion to continue on, and I would suggest that we go on for like 10 minutes and have a discussion anyway, if that's okay for all you speakers, and I hope that the rest of you stay and listen too. I'd like to start to ask, actually, I want this to be a discussion between all of you, so you don't have to ask for the word or anything, just have a discussion. How can railway stakeholders, governments, and academia work together to further enhance efforts to conserve biodiversity and improve vegetation management? Anyone like to start? Pinar, I could ask you.
Yeah, sure. It's so we actually sign for the national. So if you can solve the problem locally and national, is always help to bring it up the image for the international after that. So I think through a joint effort nationally, we can help to develop a national programs, let's say, that not only strengthen understanding and also for the biodiversity conservation, also the vegetation management, but it can also empower the local communities to actively participate. And also, I think those kind of the engagements help us to make our voices heard. I don't know what else I can say. Maybe it can come up with the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Any reflections on that, Pascal?
I can comment. I think it's partly also an administrative issue when it comes to infrastructure managers are usually quite tightly held when it comes to just starting cooperations here and there. So it's a legislation hurdle to some extent as well. It's too difficult perhaps to just initiate a cooperation. You have to have certain frameworks in place, and that can be, well, demotivating, and then it just falls out that you don't do it, and nah, someone else will. So it's administration, more or less.
I actually will use a few of the questions coming from the audience regarding Mikael Belov's presentation. This is a two-part question because we first got one and then an add-on. How do you measure the environmental impact carbon footprint of alternative treatment methods like e-weeding and the source of power, hot water in times of drought? And also the second part, and how do you compare it with treatment with PPP regarding impact on environment?
Oh, that's quite complex question. First of all, I have to say, so far there is no official or standardized approval concerning alternative methods. That's why, that's my opinion, it takes such a long time, because we have lots of points or challenges we have to approve. For example, impact on environment. I can only talk for the German conditions. And one is, for example, when we are talking about hot water and electroreading, the focus is actually set on species protection, like reptiles, for example, if they have if there is a negative impact on those species when treating vegetation control. Carbon footprint is another issue due to the fact that DB wants to be CO2 neutral until 2040. So all the electricity for heating up, for example, water or using electricity within the electro-reading system will be CO2 neutral. But until this time, it's, of course, there will be a kind of CO2 footprint and comparison with plant protection products. That's coming back to my first part of my answer. So long there is no standard existing for checking, for proving non-chemical methods. I think this is a step which has to be done by the administration, because they have to decide whether a method is environmental friendly or not. But I think that will take at least some more years.
Yeah, could you, all of you, discuss the barriers? Like, which would you, if you would rate them from 1 to 3, for instance, which are the main barriers for us to move on in this area? Baptiste?
I think the most difficult thing it's related directly to the structure of the railway infrastructure, because if we talked about the platform, so the track and the safety path, we know that we don't have the same topography on the whole area of the platform. So it's difficult to think about an industrial mechanical solution which could be suitable for all the track infrastructure, because there is no, I think, particularly about the secondary tracks, which are probably the most difficult in fact of vegetation management. They are all different, so it's difficult to think about a unique solution. Even more when we talk about mechanical solution, to have the capacity to manage vegetation on all those tracks.
Anyone else like to talk a little bit about barriers or how to move over these barriers?
Maybe
Well,
I jump.
Yeah, okay.
Pinar,
Go for it.
first.
I already talked that, so go for it.
Maybe because we Michael RB dated what couple of years ago, probably six years ago already. RB started with ITZT. And you know, it's now what 5-6 years that we collectively try to find ways to replace herbicides or move from synthetic herbicide to biologic herbicide, like Baptiste showed. But you know, railways is specific. It's not like crop area. It's very specific because you have deliverables in terms of operability, speed, and we talk about safety and integrity of infrastructure on the ballast, etc. Very specific. But the open question I have in mind is why you guys want to continue to maintain vegetation, to control vegetation like a farmer. You are not farmers. You are railways, and think not outside the box, think inside the box. And why not to consider that every single day you have thousands of trains which circulate across Europe many times per day on the same area. A farmer doesn't have that. A farmer, he might go maybe twice a day, but every single day. And why not, instead of using a weed-killing train, spray train, truck, etc., why not you guys you consider to use passenger and freight trains like vectors? Don't ask me which technology, but think about this. You use vectors, and every day each train will do its part. And maybe after 20,000 times, you will maintain the vegetation. You might not kill the vegetation, because you will kill vegetation. Vegetation is beautiful. I have my garden, I love my weeds. No, you just maintain vegetation below the hazard level for railways. And think, maybe whatever source, could be electromagnetic, could be whatever, maybe it's a new area of development that you guys should think. But, you know, new development, new ideas.
Okay, great. Yeah, actually, we have now reached our 10 minutes that I promised. So if or is there anyone who'd like to answer? It was a good word to end on. Otherwise, I think Pascal. I would like to thank all the participants for insightful presentations and all the attendees for your participation. I hope you found this webinar informative and engaging, and make sure to follow In2Track3 on LinkedIn and all the participating organizations also. And I hope that you will look out in our channels for coming events. I think we all will participate in more events in this theme or and any other railway related themes also. So thank you very much for the webinar.
Thank you for the
Bye-bye.
organization.